right, I guess we'll get started now. My name is Jamie Keech. I am from Ivaldi Venture Capital, and today I'm sitting down with Robert Delamar from Emergency First Responders, and what we're going to be doing is talking about technology and safety in the public today. And I think a good way to start this talk actually is what I actually saw first thing this morning. So I got up today, I checked my Twitter feed and clicked on a link from the New York Times, and the first thing I saw was there are even more mass shootings than you realize. This summer alone, 26 mass shootings left 126 people dead in the United States. So this is something we are continually seeing in the news again and again and again, and it hasn't been addressed in a way that's leaving anybody happy. And when I just think about this practically, there are three ways to address this, right? There are policy and regulatory changes, which we know that is a very slow ship to turn. There's, of course, addressing mental health issues, which again, that's going to take probably multiple generations. And then there are technological changes, technological solutions to address these sort of problems. And that's what I'm here today to talk with Robert about.
Yeah, thanks so much. You nailed it. On the technology side, remember that technology happens in a context. As each wave of technological innovation creates new opportunities, it also comes with it challenges. And so the biggest challenge of our day is the challenge between privacy and security. And so ultimately what we're looking to do, and many companies like us, is to create a safe context for people to go to places that are important to them, like schools or churches or synagogues or mosques, and do so without the fear, obviously, of a mass shooter type attack. Well, that's a difficult and macabre type conversation to have with most people. The reality is that you want to have security that's somewhat unobtrusive, and at the same time, it is going to do what it says and it will work as advertised. So the challenge of our day is how do you find that balance between privacy and security? And that's really the conversation for today.
I think we're best served starting with if you can tell us a little bit about what First Responders Technologies actually does and what the mission of your company is.
Yeah, so First Responder Technologies was created to provide a concealed weapons threat detection technology that's unobtrusive. So back to the privacy issue. We care a great deal about ensuring civil liberties, which means that any technology solution has to be unobtrusive, and that's what we're doing. We're using, common Wi-Fi in a perimeter type setup where between two what we call bollards or stanchions, so think about it as a virtual fence, we're able to detect, using a common Wi-Fi in the fence, a dangerous good such as, for example, a long gun. In doing so, in this manner which is greatly concerned with privacy, you can, like Internet of Things, provide information back to a first responder that they can use to respond to a threat.
So let's sort of think of a practical example. We're seeing these mass shootings occur in schools, in stadiums, in nightclubs, in all sorts of places. How would your technology, or how could it practically address these issues? Is it set up so that a guy is walking around with a cell phone and he's able to identify who's carrying a firearm? Is it a perimeter type scenario? What exactly does it look like?
It is a perimeter type scenario. So in the earliest stages, it looks like a fence without the fence. It's just the posts.
And so someone walks in, they're identified, and the idea is that you're able to address this before it escalates and becomes a more serious situation.
Correctly. We call it the magic 10 to 15 seconds. So some of the research that we have looked at says that one of the hardest problems to address in a mass shooting scenario is the chaos that inevitably happens when somebody opens up. And so if you can provide, in that magic 10 to 15 seconds, information about the location of the shooter and what it is that they're carrying, you have a leg up from the perspective of the first responder who needs to respond in that scenario.
So this is a pretty hot topic right now in the U.S. politically, socially. Presumably, you have competitors in this space that are building similar or competing technologies. What sets you guys apart, and what are you doing differently from other players in this space?
That's a really interesting question. This is software versus hardware. Because we're using Wi-Fi as the detection technology, Wi-Fi is well understood, it's socially acceptable, people have it in their homes, and it's cheap to deploy and to manage. So if we can use unlicensed spectrum, which Wi-Fi enables us to do, and take that unlicensed spectrum and turn it into a detection technology, we can provide a wide mesh perimeter security system that would enable us to get to market faster and cheaper in a way that would allow for better data collection and then ultimately the holy grail, which is response for the first responders that are responding to these events.
And now if you had a detractor that says, how does this differentiate itself from a typical just metal detector system that you're seeing at airports or stadiums or wherever today?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The reality is a magnetometer, so a magnet-based system, is going to be able to detect metals, right? However, you, in a large venue like this one, say for example, God forbid, there was a terrorist attack here at the Vancouver Convention Center. Think about it for a moment. This is a huge space. How are you going to find somebody that's got a long gun intent on committing murder at an event like this? And the answer is, you can't make everybody go through metal detectors before they enter into a building, or more importantly, when they're inside the building, it's going to be difficult to find them once you get inside. So this is the hard shell versus like soft interior security problem.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're trying to address.
So you're not just identifying them as they go through the door. It's,
correct.
Once it becomes a problem, you'll be able to find them within a perimetered space.
Correct, that's right. Any place where the virtual fence is deployed, it allows for that detection.
So I think at this point it's worth talking about what you guys are doing within the company. We spoke earlier very briefly, and you said most of your technology is taken from a university. Can you give us a background of where the technology originated and what the plans are going forward over the coming year?
Yeah, so the company was founded by a former RCMP officer. And so the opportunity came from the fact that we have a gentleman whose job it was to respond to these kind of situations. And so he founded another public safety company. And what he learned from that is that faster, better, cheaper software beats hardware. And so Rutgers University, there's a group called WinLab there, which is a very famous electrical engineering group. They're one of the earliest pioneers of networking technology. The associate director of WinLab, a doctor by the name of Dr. Jennifer Chen, she and her team realized that you could use channel state information in the Wi-Fi spectrum to detect dangerous goods. And that became a paper that was published at the IEEE, and not a lot of people know necessarily what the IEEE is, except for electrical engineers. They're both a standards association as well as a professional association for electrical engineers. So most of the big software developers, for example, around the world would belong to the IEEE. At the IEEE level, Jennifer and her team published a peer-reviewed paper, and it won Best Paper in 2018. It was that paper that kicked everything off. Our founder realized, wow, this is a better way to do perimeter security. And from there, the company was formed, and Rutgers has become a major shareholder and the source of the original innovation. Now we're in the process of developing or moving that technology from the lab to the marketplace.
So what comes next? If I'm sitting in the crowd right now and I'm considering investing in the company, what can I expect my money to be going into over the next 12 months? And where are you in the process of potentially going public or advancing the prototypes?
Yeah, so the company is in the waiting period right now. We filed our preliminary prospectus with the British Columbia Securities Commission. And so from here, post-public IPO, we will have funds dedicated largely to R&D. And that R&D is going to move the innovation from the lab where it is right now to a public demonstration of the technology in a few months, and then from there into commercial availability about, I would say, 12 to 24 months from now.
And is there any sort of patents in place that keeps competitors out from just mimicking your model, or what sort of safety blocks do you have in place for investors?
Yeah, so there's a patent application from the folks at Rutgers, and that's the core technology stack that we've licensed. We have an exclusive global license for the technology from Rutgers. And then from there, we're in the process of patenting our own innovation that we are developing on top of the Rutgers technology stack.
And from your company's perspective, what is the future of this sector in general? I mean, we talked about the perimeter technology. Is there an opportunity to go beyond that? Is there, I guess this is more philosophical, but do you see the way firearms are detected and the way sort of public safety is managed from a technological perspective changing over the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, so we started off the conversation talking about technology developing in a context, in a social, political, cultural context. The reality is that the world is now starting to see the first commercial implementation of something called Web 3.0. And Web 3.0 is really, we've moved beyond the initial internet, which was 1990s to early 2000s, to Web 2.0, which was your Facebook, social, point-to-point type communication, to now a world where the world is secured with blockchain, where all small computers are embedded in everything. That's called the Internet of Things, and where you have an autonomous layer of decision-making happening at the computing level, which is something called artificial intelligence. And each of those are big concepts, and below that are obviously large ecosystems of innovation. But what you're seeing is as the chipsets evolve, as the cloud develops, as Moore's law continues, we're going to see faster and better chips, ever smaller, which allows for more innovation faster. And what you're going to see is that we're going to be in a world awash in information. But as you know, information without analysis is useless. And that's where the autonomy of the computer in the form of artificial intelligence and computer-aided decision-making in the context of, say, for example, a mass shooter threat becomes a really interesting response to some of these societal problems like mass shootings, or even in a broader sense, terrorist attacks, or even moving out a little ways to the context of the military. In the military world, there was something called total battlefield awareness that was developed in the 1990s. People kind of have a rough sense about this. It really started to develop in the Iraq wars, where the idea was if you know where a bad guy is and what they have, then you can respond to that. Well, what's happening in the civilian context, of course, is that when and let's call a mass shooting event what it is, a domestic terror attack, when that happens, if you don't know, if you don't have that information, how are you going to respond? The answer is right now is chaos. So if we can provide some order through computers and some autonomy in terms of information that aids a first responder, you're going to start to see the reality of Web 3.0 in public safety and security.
Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. Before we finish off, I wanted to ask, does anyone from the audience have any questions that they'd like to pose? No. Okay, well, is there anything anyone should know about the company going forward, where they can find out more information, where they can learn more about what you're actually doing and what the plans are? Sure,
I mean, our website is the best place to start. It's www.firstrespondertech.com. www.firstrespondertech.com. The idea here, again, if I can just back up and reiterate what I said before, is that in these horrible events, to the degree or extent you can provide better information to the people who are tasked to run into the building to respond to these things, the greater the likelihood that lives will be saved. And that's ultimately the mission or the objective of the company. So there's a social entrepreneurship element to this company, which is really important. It's a message that I want the audience to understand and that we have internalized as part of the values of the company. The company was founded by a former RCMP officer who had dedicated his life to public service. And then as the company has evolved, we have internalized those values such that Where there's an opportunity to do good, that's where we want to jump in with technology.
What has the reception been amongst law enforcement that you've worked with? I know, going through your investor deck, you have Stockwell Day as an advisor to the company. People know that he previously ran for Prime Minister of Canada. I think he was the Minister of Public Safety at one point.
Yeah.
What has the reaction been from politicians, law enforcement, et cetera, people that will be actually using this sort of technology?
So it was your first question that was the key one. Especially talking to policymakers in the United States, there is a frustration with the current set of politics in the US. You've got the Second Amendment. It is what it is. And you have a policy issue that doesn't seem to be able to move forward because you're either anti-gun or pro-gun and nobody can talk to each other anymore. The key opportunity here is that we step away from politics. All we're saying is we don't care if people are necessarily carrying guns. In fact, something like 8% of the US population has a concealed carry permit. So it really isn't about concealed weapons detection. It's about detecting a mass shooter. And if you ask the question correctly, you're going to get a better response from a technology perspective.
And what is the question you should be asking?
How can you differentiate between a police officer who also carries a weapon and a bad guy? And the answer there is that through technology, through better perimeter security opportunities and otherwise, you can move the political issue away or keep the political issue where it belongs in Congress or in Parliament, and we can simply provide a better solution to find bad guys.
All right. Well, Robert, I think you guys are doing some very important work. Thank you very much for taking the time today, chat about it. Guys, that's First Responders Technologies and Robert Delamar. So thank you very much for watching, and Robert, thank you for taking the time to chat.
Thank you for your time.